Now here's a cherry little unit. We can put the friggin' coolant away for this one. Main complaint for this sled, always loses its prime when it's sitting for a little while. They always have to give her a shot of gas down the spark plugs there to get her fired up. I guess I should have asked him, but it's when you leave it sit overnight. Maybe it's after it sits for a couple of weeks. I don't know. But he said he's seeing bubbles in the fuel line. I'm not sure where, but probably somewhere in that vicinity. All the fuel lines, for the most part, have been changed. At least all of the important ones, the ones before the fuel pump. It sounds like the fuel pump's sucking in a bit of air. That fuel valve might be a little suspicious. Fortunately, the cheap line was used, at least by the looks of it anyways. Oh. Ah, look at that. See how the pull rope here was gouging a hole in the fuel line? That actually looks like she might have made her right through. Well, I wonder if we found the problem already. Here's the fuel line he supplied me. It looks like the cheaper clear stuff, but in all honesty, this stuff kind of feels a bit better than what I remember the cheaper clear stuff being, and it's definitely got a thicker wall, so you never know, maybe it's good stuff too. But regardless of what it is, that's what we're going to be using on this sled. No Tygon on this one. I do notice she has a primer on her too. That would be super handy in the morning. Oh shoot, I'm out of coffee. We're going to have to go reload. Well, she's pretty much empty. Barely even touching anything on the float. The gas doesn't smell terrible. It doesn't smell amazing, but it definitely doesn't smell terrible. So maybe just for good measure, since there's so little in there, I'm going to suck out whatever's left in there, just in case there's some water hanging out near the bottom. Just from what I can tell, the pickup is rock hard too. Normally I wouldn't be too worried about it, but since we got a fuel delivery issue here, I'm kind of just thinking I want to start all over with the fuel lines and make sure that's not the problem. Well, I went ahead and took this steering wheel cover off, and then this little thingamajig here. And then I was at least able to move all this plastic stuff up higher. Propped her up with a hose there, and now I can actually see what's going on under here. See cable protector pushed way up to the top. We're going to go ahead and fix that. I noticed that the fuel line coming from the tank is like wrapped around the friggin' throttle cable and the choke cable. I don't like that, man. I like just routing stuff in their own place. I don't like tangling in their own stuff. I guess maybe the purpose of doing that was to keep it from rubbing on the steering or something, but I don't know. Regardless, I noticed this pickup line here is pretty darn stiff. I wouldn't say it's rock hard, but it's pretty stiff. So you get right down close to the nipple there. Although the only thing is it's actually kind of too soft. I can easily squish that hose together with my fingers. I bet you any money that line is falling apart inside. I don't know if that was a problem back when he used the sled, but it is definitely a problem now. I don't think that fuel line was changed for a long time. Doesn't look like it anyways. Here's the primer line coming from the primer and going to the carburetors. Oh, it won't actually break for me now. As you can see, I just bent it a little bit up here and it just snapped. Maybe the sun's hitting it, it's warming it up now or something. But it's important we don't have any primer leaks because they're plugging directly into a manifold vacuum port on the carburetor. Well, that's kind of a strange color for gas. Look at that, purple gas. The premix oil he used was purple. Yeah, I forgot to mention, he said he always premixes this sled. And I noticed the oil tank is bone dry empty, so I don't know, the oiler mustn't work properly or something. I'm not going to fart around with that, I'll just premix it like he did. Yeah, purple gas. Looks kind of cool. Oh, we ended up getting just about 20 liters of purple gas out of it. You wouldn't think there'd be that much gas left when there's nothing reading on the gauge. I mean, 10 liters at the most, you'd think. Well, we got our pickup line out of there. This is it. It goes in and it just went all the way and rested like that at the back. I mean, it's almost at the back of the tank right there. No clamps, although the hose was pretty tight on there, so it may not need them, but since this is not a very easily accessible hose, I'm going to definitely try to find some clamps to put on there. This one actually does have a pickup screen, which is good. Wasn't even plugged at all, so. And actually, like, I can tell this was replaced. You know, it's still got some flex to it. I took that primer out. It seems to be plugged. It won't pump nothing. And I was just gonna, I tried running WD-40 through it and pumping it in some gas, and it just refused to work. Then I started trying to take this end off, and it was going good, and it was starting to get kind of loose, so I put my pliers on these nipples here because I thought it didn't have much pressure left, and I just spun them right off, so that primer's now for sure junk. But if it wasn't coming back to life by now, I'm sure it's screwed anyways. It's going to be a primerless system for now. We can easily add that in later. Carbs are out of sync. Seems like the one on the left is coming up before the one on the right. I'll have to go ahead and balance those out real quick. Made ourselves a new Tygon pickup. Since we're dealing with a pickup and we want to know it's going to work, I just use Tygon for it, and I'll use his stuff for the rest of the sled. And I absolutely couldn't find clamps anywhere. I just went ahead and used some wire. You can see first I wrapped it around, twisted it up, tightened it up with my needle nose, then folded those ends back over in front of it here and twisted them up again, and again tightened it up with the needle nose. This thing ain't turning at all. You can see that it's a little bit squished, so she's definitely going to provide a good seal. Shouldn't be any problems. Alright, she's in there. And just for good measure, I put a little Teflon tape on there too. See it down there? Well, got the carburetors out. We have both clamps on our water separator hose here on both carbs, so that's good. This hose is a little on the stiff side. I don't know if I have any hose like that either. That's the next size up, I think. It is, yeah. I bought a bunch of fuel hose today, but I forgot to buy this. Shoot. Here's our pulse line. Honestly, it was not in 100% brand new shape, but she's still darn flexible. It's got a clamp on the engine side, and it had a screw clamp here on the pump side. There's no rub through spots. The inside isn't cracking. In all honesty, this hose was probably fine, but since we are having a fuel delivery issue, I'm going to change it anyways. Just bought some fresh stuff for the occasion. Yeah, these lines weren't very old, but this one that went from the pump to the filter was so hard it just snapped right off of the pump there. Yeah, man, that cheap hose, man, I do not like it. Here's the old filter. Go ahead and chuck that. He actually bought a couple of actual proper filters for these sleds, so we're gonna go ahead and use that. Yeah, that new line he bought, boy, that stuff fits tight on everything. You honestly don't even need clamps, but just to be 100% sure, since we don't have clamps, I've been zip tying them and just yanking them good and tight. Can't spin the hose around on there. Make 100% sure there's no possibility of air leaks. Carb boots look fine upon first glance, but they're getting pretty stiff, and as you can see, she's cracking out. You can see it better on the left side here. Now, I don't think that's all the way through. We're not going to worry about him for right now, but I'm definitely going to tell him he needs new carb boots in the near future just to be safe. Unless the sled has a lean running issue when I get it started here. If it does, then we're going to shut it off and wait until we get new carb boots. Since this thing had premix, I'm wondering if I should just open up the carbs. Well, I want to leak test them anyway, so yeah. Well, the gas wasn't terrible in this sled. And the jets are looking nice and clear. I don't think I'm going to bother pulling the jets out on this one. Well, the jets are looking pretty clear on this one too. Alright, well, some liquid that didn't smell like gas just dripped out of here. Oh, and I accidentally poured it all over that carburetor. We can see a little bit that made her onto there. Definitely was storing some water. Lots of mud in there. I'm sure that one is the same. You know what? I think I'm going to try a little harder to see if I can find some new chunks of hose. Alrighty, time for the leak test. We got our nice fresh water separator lines going on there. I ended up robbing the hose from my oil pump thing here because I had always meant to put a bigger line on this one, and the line that was on it happened to be the right size. So right on. It's nice and soft. It should last for many years. I think I'll just leave these sit overnight. I'll drape this over top just so evaporation occurs as little as possible, and we'll see if any of this stuff is wet tomorrow. Well, I got the new pulse line in down there. Snaking her way up to the fuel pump. Both ends are securely clamped. That shouldn't cause any issues now. I kind of got distracted and greased up everything under the hood here, that steering linkage. This sled, I couldn't find a grease nipple where it spins on that bolt there. But it's not stiff and it's not squeaking, so it'll be fine for now, I guess. I don't think these things are ever technically supposed to be lubricated, but I like to. Makes them work a lot nicer and smoother and makes them last longer. I just use my Witch's Brew Dexron and a little bit of Lucas mix. It's got that creepability of the automatic transmission fluid, yet it's got that stickiness of the Lucas, so I find it works really good. Now she's just steering like a dream. I never really thought of doing that with the other sleds. Oh well, I'll ask him if he wants me to do it to the other sleds too. And once it's assembled and I flip it, I'll be able to grease the stuff under the track there. Well, I almost forgot to show this here. I already put one bowl on. But she's the next day and I don't see any wetness whatsoever. So I think she's good to go. You can see our gas level went down a bit. The gas has also got a lot more yellow. That's just from evaporation. So A-OK, no leaks. That means I guess we're ready to put these carbs back on there. Not sure if I showed this yet, but this is just, come on. I mean, what probably happened was whoever was working on this sled had this jack shaft out to replace bearings or something, and put it all back together and didn't realize he was on top of the wiring harness. You can see she just buffed that friggin' shaft right clean. Well, it's not wearing down to the wires yet, but it is starting to rub on that wiring harness pretty good there. Man, that's a bummer. I wonder what I could do to fix that. Holy smokers, man. How does that happen? She's got a big gash in her. I can feel it just a little wee bit where the belt rubs. Probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but still, man, hola. Wonder what happened there. Alright, our fuel line's all done. I don't think I'm going to bother putting zip ties on the filter for now, just in case. Check it in the near future, although I don't think we will. The old filter didn't seem that dirty. But as I've said before, these Polaris filters, man, they got extra large nipples on them, and that hose is not going to leak one bit, let me tell you that. But if I'm seeing a bunch of air bubbles and stuff around it, then of course I'll zip tie them. We'll see if this fixes up the issue here. Here's how I routed the fuel lines. They used to be coming up from the front of the carbs like this. Figured they're a little neater this way. I did make sure that all my new fuel hoses didn't interfere with that oiler thing down there. Want to make sure your hoses ain't rubbing up against that little lever. Although in this case, he just runs premix in this thing. He said that's what they did when he bought it. And I noticed the oil container here is bone dry. I'm not going to fart around with that. If he's been premixing it, then we'll just leave it alone. But I'd be curious to put some oil in it and put a piece of tape and see if it's actually using any. At least when you're premixing, you know it's getting oil. Well, I think this is as close as we're going to get her. Now we need to plug up these manifold vacuum ports that our old primer used to be plumbed into. Well, this old girl should be ready to start. Before I get too excited here, I'm going to go ahead and fix this wiring harness under the jack shaft problem. I just cannot let this sled go back before fixing that, or at least trying anyways. I'm just unhooking all the wiring harness connections, and why are they all melted? I just noticed that right now. What is going on here? That's weird. So yeah, I noticed this one was crumbling apart. I thought maybe it was just because it's getting too old or something, but this one actually looks like it may have melted a little bit. Huh? I don't know. Maybe they're just degraded from the sun. I don't know. Anyways, we're unhooking all these wiring harness connections, and maybe I'll be able to snip all the zip ties and pull it back underneath of that axle. That would be nice. And reroute it above. And then she'd be ready to fire up, except for one more thing. We have got some really awful gear oil going on in here. Look at all the shavings on that. It's literally like fat with shavings. That's crazy. Nasty. Yeah, you can see how it's all magnetic. Smells like good old stinky gear oil. Guess we'll have to get that crap out of there and put some Dexron in her. For now anyways, he said he's got a bunch of chain oil stashed somewhere around his place that he's got to find, and when he does find it, then we'll probably take the Dexron out and put that chain case oil in. Putting Dexron in it will kind of help clean her out a little bit. Alrighty, I made my chops where I needed to make them. I marked the wires so I don't confuse which ones go where. And this guy that wasn't hooked up to nothing, I just got kind of completely colored in there just so I don't get confused. These connectors were in quite a bit better shape than I thought. Well, I guess they're not. They're pretty screwed, but the first one that I removed was the most falling apart. Unhook the light for the speedo. Now I'll unplug our ignition hookup under there. You can barely see it. And we'll see how this goes. Well, we're having to dive in a little deeper than I had initially thought. Had to do a few connections for the taillight assembly, but I guess what do you expect when you're removing a wiring harness, eh? Oh well, we're there. Now we can see how it was rubbing here. Oh my Lanta, finally! We got it all out. No more rubbing on the jack shaft. Well, luckily, nothing suffered any damage whatsoever. These wires that were for the taillight assembly there were already cracked. I'll have to see, I guess, maybe just a little electrical tape. Because I don't think we need to go as far as to start chopping out sections of wire and soldering and heat shrinking in new stuff. Well, there's my fixed wire. I don't know if I'm proud of it or not, but I've pulled this wire out a bit here, and you know, it's perfectly fine back that way. I noticed this connector here that was up right beside the ignition switch plug here. It wasn't plugged into anything. It's looking pretty melted. There is this little hole right here that was manually cut out by somebody, so I bet you there was a hand warmer switch there at one time. We got another hole over here though. Maybe one of them was for the hand warmers and one was for the thumb warmer. Anyways, okay. I've repaired that. Well, I ended up having to patch a couple of spots where the wire insulation cracked. It's funny because you go up here and the wire is just fine, but everywhere where this wire was exposed in this area is just totally dry and cracking apart, as you can see here. Unfortunately, this wire pulled out of this connector, so now I have to chop it and go find another one. The other end of that connector, which is the wire that goes into this doohickey here, is still nice and brand new soft, so it makes me think that it's newer. I wonder if it was just, you know, being more exposed to the elements is what's causing this wire to crack right in this area, or it makes me wonder if somebody at some point in time was hosing all this brake stuff off here with like some real potent brake cleaner or something. And actually it looks like that wire's starting to rub out a little bit where it's going between this frame rail and the tank here. I may have to go dig out some of this smaller looming from one of the junk cars there and put it right here just to protect this wire from rubbing out. Probably what I'll do, but first I gotta fix this wire now. Well, we finally got her. This is starting to get a little on the redneck side, but You know what? All the crack spots are patched. Like I said, I'm going to find some loom tomorrow sometime and put it in up to here so it doesn't rub out here. And I even patched up where the wires were cracking right on the other side of this connector. She probably just needed a new harness right there, but or at the very least some extensive wire replacement in that harness. Whatever, she's good to go now. I just gotta plug everything back in. Oh, thank gosh the wires aren't rotting up here in the harness. Now I guess before I forget, I gotta zip tie this harness down here in a couple of spots to make sure it doesn't rub on the pull rope or the jack shaft. Well, I sprayed all the connectors out with contact cleaner, got them back together. Now I got my heat shrink tubing here in place, and we're just waiting for the soldering iron to warm up, and we're going to solder them. There we go, there's that one completed. There's that one soldered up. Slide the heat shrink tubing over it. Should be as good as patched. There we go, all finished up. Wiring harness is 100% back in place again. I even put a wad of tape over that nub of solder right here. I guess the last and final thing is to change that chain case fluid out. Well, we got the old fridge pump fired up here. See the glitter floating through. Oh, there's a lot of glitter in there. Alrighty, got ourselves some nice fresh ATF in there. Now before I start it and get the carbs all filled up, I'm going to flip it over and grease everything that I need to grease under in the track area there. Holy crap, look at how flopping loose this track is. Like if you wanted, you could just pop it right off of the bogies if you tried. Yeah, that's way too loose. Figure out what we need to grease. Got a grease nipple right there. Right there. And there should be one for this shaft up here. Oh yeah, right there. And then there's that one right there. Well, got 10 fresh liters of pre-mixed premium in her. Got some pre-mixed prime here. Alrighty, does she roar to life? Well, I tried. That is the shortest little crappy pull rope in the world. Alrighty, try number 2. No gas yet. Usually them fuel pumps, you know, well, they only got to run for a couple of seconds and they'll prime themselves and fill up. I personally think this fuel pump is shot, but maybe it's just got sticky valves or something. So I went ahead and just pushed some premixed gas through it. We're just going to let it sit there full of fresh gas for a while and see if it fires up tonight or tomorrow. Unfortunately, I got to get to work here. I'm already running a little late, so. Alright, well, it's the next day. That fuel has been marinating in that fuel pump all night. Let's see if it actually primes up today. It tried. I could see bubbles coming up to the carburetors there, but it still didn't fill up anything here. But I believe I am going to call that fuel pump no good. It shouldn't have took that much to get it to prime. It also needs new carburetor boots, and I need to tighten up the track. But I think I'm going to save that for a part 2. So. Now we need to plug up them. Now we need to plug up the old manifold vacuum ports here. Now we need to plug up these manual vacuum. And I guess the last and final thing is change out that transfer case. It's a 4-wheel drive sled here.